She thought winning her freedom before the council was the hardest battle she'd ever face. He was wrong. 3 months after giving birth to the world's first legally recognized hybrid, Izira woke to find her daughter's crib empty and a note from the woman who raised her. The same woman who'd just sold Aurora for 10,000 gold pieces. What followed was a mother's desperate race against time, a blood magic ritual that demanded sacrifice, and the terrible moment when the only person who'd ever truly loved Izira walked into a death circle so her grandniece could live. This is the story of what happened after they thought they'd won. After they let their guard down. After they learned that some people will do just anything to watch you lose what they never had. And that there are some who would burn the world just to keep you safe. Chapter 1. Izira woke to fire in her veins. Not the comforting warmth of Drake's presence beside her, but something else entirely. A burning that started in her chest and radiated outward until every nerve ending screamed. She gasped, her hands clutching at the sheets, her sightless eyes flying open to darkness that suddenly felt different, wrong, changed. Izira. Drake's voice, thick with sleep, immediately sharpened with concern. What's wrong? I don't know, she managed through gritted teeth. Something's happening. Something's. The pain spiked and she screamed. Drake's hands found her shoulders, his heat flaring instinctively to soothe her. But instead of comfort, his touch made the burning worse. Izira's back arched, her body convulsing as power she didn't understand surged through her like lightning seeking ground. Your eyes, Drake breathed, and she heard the shock, the fear in his voice. Izira, your eyes are glowing. What? Her hands flew to her face, but she couldn't see what he saw. She'd never been able to see anything. They're not brown anymore, Drake said, his voice barely above a whisper. They're gold. Dragon gold. The world tilted sideways. Izira felt Drake catch her as she swayed, his arms crushing her against his chest even as heat radiated from her skin in waves that should have been impossible for a wolf. The baby, she gasped, her hand moving to her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant and now this. Is the baby moving? Drake said, his hand covering hers. I can feel it. Strong, angry maybe, but strong. The burning began to subside, leaving Izira trembling and drenched in sweat. But something had changed. She could feel it in the way the air moved around her, in the heightened awareness that made even Drake's familiar scent seem sharper, more complex. And underneath it all, a power that hummed in her bones like a second heartbeat. What's happening to me? She whispered against his chest. Drake was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried 3,000 years of knowledge and absolute certainty. You're not just a wolf, Izira. You never were. The next hours were a blur of discovery and denial. Drake lit every candle in their chambers, studying Izira with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His fingers traced her face, her arms, her hands, searching for signs of what her body was becoming. Your temperature has risen 10 degrees, he said, clinical despite the tremor in his voice. Your scent has changed, there's smoke in it now and stone. Dragon markers. He paused. And your gift. Can you still sense emotions? Izira reached out with the ability she'd relied on her entire life, the heightened awareness that had always set her apart. But what she found now made her breath catch. She didn't just smell Drake's emotions anymore. She could feel them, taste them, see them as colors she'd never experienced blooming in the darkness behind her eyes. Fear, golden and sharp. Love, deep crimson, warm as blood. And underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that blazed white-hot and absolute. I can sense more than before, she whispered. So much more. Drake, what does this mean? It means, a new voice said from the doorway, making them both startle, that the secret I've kept for 23 years has finally come to light. Aunt Mary stood in the entrance, her face pale but resolute. And for the first time in Izira's memory, her beloved aunt smelled of fear. You need to tell her, Drake said, his voice hard as he positioned himself between Mary and Izira. Now. Before the council hearing tomorrow. Before. I know, Mary interrupted, her footsteps approaching slowly. I came as soon as I felt it. The awakening. Felt what? Izira demanded, her hands clenched into fists. Aunt Mary, what's happening to me? Mary's hand found Izira's, gripping tight. 23 years ago I was walking the border of Moonshade territory when I heard screaming. A woman dying. I found her in a clearing, bleeding from wounds no wolf should have survived, holding a newborn baby in her arms. Izira's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "The woman was a hybrid," Mary continued, her voice breaking. "Half wolf, half dragon. She'd been hunted by the council for being an abomination, for daring to exist. She'd just given birth and she knew she was dying. Her last words were a plea: hide the baby. Protect her. Never let them know what she is." The world stopped. "That baby was me," Izira whispered. "That baby was you," Mary confirmed. "I brought you to my brother, claimed you were an orphaned wolf pup I'd found. Patricia and her husband never questioned it. And I never told them the truth, that you were the child of a forbidden union. That your mother died protecting you from a world that would kill you for existing." Drake's arms wrapped around Izira from behind, his heat the only thing keeping her upright as the truth shattered everything she'd ever known. "Patricia and her husband," Izira said slowly, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. "They're not my biological parents." "No," Mary said gently. "They raised you, but they never knew the truth. I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk them rejecting you or worse, turning you over to the council. That's why they treated me like I was broken." Izira's voice cracked. "Like I was less than. They sensed I wasn't really theirs. That I was different." "They're fools," Drake growled against her hair. "But that's done now. What matters is what this means for the council hearing tomorrow." Mary's silence was answer enough. "They'll kill her," Drake said flatly. "If they discover she's a hybrid. The council has laws, ancient, brutal laws, about genetic contamination. They'll execute her on sight." "Then we don't go," Izira said, turning in Drake's arms. "We run. We disappear. We fight," Drake interrupted, his hands cupping her face. "We go to that council, we face Rowan's claim, and we win. Because I refuse to spend the rest of our lives running. I refuse to let you hide what you are. But if they discover..." "Then they discover it," Drake said fiercely. "And they'll have to go through me to touch you. Through me, through my fortress, through 3,000 years of accumulated power and rage. Let them try." Mary stepped closer, her hand finding Izira's shoulder. "There might be a way," she said carefully. "If you can control it. If you can hide the dragon markers long enough to get through the hearing." "I don't even know what I am," Izira protested. "How am I supposed to control it?" "I'll teach you," Drake said, and his voice carried the weight of millennia. "I'll pour every ounce of knowledge I have into you. We have until dawn. It will have to be enough." "And if it's not?" Izira whispered. Drake's lips found hers, fierce and claiming. "Then we burn the world down together," he breathed against her mouth. "But we do it on our terms. Do you trust me, little wolf?" Izira's hands found his face, tracing features she'd memorized through touch, feeling the absolute certainty in his heartbeat. "With everything I am." "Then let's make you into something the council has never seen before," Drake said, pulling her close, his forehead pressing against hers in a gesture of intimacy and promise. "Something powerful enough to stand before them and survive. Something that proves love is stronger than their hatred." Chapter 2. The hours that followed were the most agonizing of Izira's life. Drake took her to the highest tower of the fortress, where the air was thin and cold and dragon magic saturated every stone. He positioned her in the center of an ancient circle etched into the floor, his hands on her shoulders, his voice low and commanding. "Magic is intention," he said. "Power is will. You have both, you just need to learn to direct them. Feel the heat in your chest. That's your dragon core awakening. Don't fight it. Channel it." Izira tried. She reached for the burning sensation that had terrified her hours ago, tried to grasp it, shape it, control it. But the power was wild, untamed, and every time she thought she had it, it slipped through her mental fingers like smoke. "I can't," she gasped after the 10th attempt, sweat pouring down her face despite the cold. "Drake, I can't do this." "You can," he insisted, his grip tightening on her shoulders. "You've survived things that should have destroyed you. You've adapted to a world you couldn't see. You've learned Braille in months when it takes others years. This is just another skill, Izira. Just another way of seeing." "But I don't have years," Izira said desperately. "I have hours." "Then we cheat," Drake said, and something in his voice made her still. "What do you mean?" "There's a technique," he said carefully. "Magical transfusion. I can pour my control directly into you, lend you my 3,000 years of experience. But it's dangerous. The strain on your body, on the baby. How dangerous? Izira interrupted. Silence. Drake, she pressed. How dangerous? It could kill you, he admitted, his voice raw with the confession. The amount of power I'd need to transfer, the speed required, your body might not survive it. And the baby. He couldn't finish the sentence. Izira's hand moved to her belly, feeling the strong kicks beneath her palm. Their daughter. The child they'd already started to love before she was even born. And if I go to that council without control, they'll discover what you are and execute you on sight, Drake said bluntly. Which means our daughter dies too. The choice was no choice at all. Do it, Izira said. Izira. Do it, she repeated, her voice strengthening with resolve. I didn't survive Rowan's violation, my family's rejection, and being sold like cattle just to die afraid. If this kills me, at least I'll die fighting. At least I'll die choosing my own fate. Drake's hands trembled against her shoulders and she felt moisture hit her face, his tears falling freely. If I lose you. You won't, Izira said with a certainty she didn't entirely feel. She reached up, finding his face with her hands, feeling the wetness on his cheeks. Because I have something to fight for now. A dragon who loves me enough to cry for me. A baby who deserves to live. And a future where I don't have to hide what I am. She felt him lean in, his forehead pressing against hers in that gesture that had become theirs. Intimate, grounding, a promise without words. If this goes wrong, he whispered, his breath hot against her lips, I'm burning the entire world to ashes and following you into death. I survived 300 years without Sarah. I won't survive a single day without you. Dramatic, Izira said, managing a smile despite her fear. Her hands slid from his face to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. I love you too. His lips crashed against hers then, desperate and claiming, pouring 3,000 years of loneliness and 3 months of falling in love into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and trembling. Hold on to me, Drake commanded, his voice shifting into something ancient and terrible. And don't let go no matter what happens. Focus on my voice. Focus on us. Focus on our daughter and the life we're going to build together. Can you do that? Yes, Izira breathed. Then survive this, he said. Because I need you, little wolf. I need you more than I've needed anything in 3 millennia. Izira's hands found his chest, her fingers digging into his shirt. She felt his heat flare, felt power building around them like a storm about to break. And then he poured 3,000 years of dragon magic directly into her soul. Pain. Unimaginable, searing, absolute pain that made her earlier awakening seem like a gentle warming. Izira screamed, her body convulsing as power flooded through her, rewiring nerves, reshaping pathways, forcing her human wolf form to accommodate something it was never meant to hold. Stay with me. Drake's voice cut through the agony, an anchor in the storm. Izira, stay with me. She could feel him holding her upright, could feel his own power depleting dangerously as he gave her everything. Images flooded her mind, 3,000 years of flight, of battles, of losses and loves, and the absolute control it took to contain dragonfire within flesh. The baby kicked violently and Izira felt a surge of panic cut through the pain. The baby is strong. Drake gasped, and she realized he was in pain too, the transfusion draining him to dangerous levels. Fighting. Like her mother. Stay with us, Izira. Stay. The thought of her daughter gave Izira strength she didn't know she had. She stopped fighting the power flooding her system and instead opened herself to it, accepted it, made space for the impossible within the architecture of her bones. Her daughter deserved a mother who was strong enough to protect her. Who was brave enough to face anything. She could do this. She would do this. And something shifted. The pain transformed into pressure, into heat, into a building force that demanded release. Izira felt her back burning, felt her shoulder blades separating in a way that should have been agony but instead felt like finally breathing after a lifetime of suffocation. Drake, she gasped. Some things. I know, he breathed, wonder creeping into his voice despite his exhaustion. God's Izira, I know. Let it happen. Don't fight it. Wings. Golden, translucent, impossible wings burst from her back in a cascade of light and power. They spread wide, filling the tower room, and for one perfect moment Izira felt what it was like to be both wolf and dragon, both earthbound and capable of flight, both the girl who'd been called broken and the woman who'd become something the world had never seen. Then the wings retracted, folding back into her body as naturally as breathing, and Izira collapsed into Drake's arms. They went down together, Drake too exhausted to keep them upright, landing hard on the stone floor. He cradled her against his chest, both of them shaking with exertion and the magnitude of what they'd just done. "You did it," he whispered hoarsely, his lips pressing against her hair, her forehead, anywhere he could reach. "You beautiful, impossible, magnificent creature. You did it." Izira could barely breathe, but she could feel the difference in her body now. The power wasn't wild anymore. It was hers, controlled, waiting for her command. And underneath it all, her enhanced gift had expanded exponentially. She could sense not just emotions now, but intentions, lies, truth. The very essence of what people were beneath what they pretended to be. "The council," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow. I can face them now." "Yes," Drake agreed, his arms tightening around her protectively. "Yes, you can. And I'll be right beside you. Every step. Every breath." They lay together on the cold stone for a long time, too exhausted to move, wrapped in each other's arms and the knowledge that they'd crossed a threshold there was no coming back from. "I love you," Izira whispered into the darkness, her hand finding his face, tracing the lines of exhaustion and devotion etched there. "Even if tomorrow destroys us, I love you." "Tomorrow won't destroy us," Drake promised, catching her hand and pressing it against his lips. "Tomorrow we show them what happens when they try to cage something that was meant to fly. Tomorrow we prove that love is stronger than their laws." Chapter 3. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, tasting of salt and desperation and absolute devotion. When he finally pulled back, he lifted her carefully and carried her back to their chambers, refusing to let her walk despite his own depleted strength. "Rest," he commanded, settling her into their bed and curling around her protectively, one hand spanning her pregnant belly where their daughter slept peacefully through the storm. "Sleep, little wolf. Let me hold you. Let me convince myself we're both still alive." Izira let herself relax into his embrace, feeling his heartbeat against her back, his breath stirring her hair. "We're alive," she confirmed softly. "And tomorrow we fight for the right to stay that way." "Together," Drake murmured, already half asleep from exhaustion. "Together," Izira agreed and let the darkness take her. Dawn came too quickly. Izira woke to find Drake already awake, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle even though she couldn't see his gaze. She could feel it though, the weight of his attention, the fierce protectiveness mixed with barely controlled fear. "Your eyes are brown again," he said quietly. "The gold only shows when you're using power. Good. If you keep your emotions controlled, keep the dragon contained, they won't know." "Unless Rowan pushes me," Izira said, sitting up carefully. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways, but the power hummed steadily beneath her skin, controlled and ready. "Unless he says something that makes me angry enough to." "Which is why I'll be right there beside you," Drake interrupted, his hand finding hers and lacing their fingers together. "Every moment. Every breath. You're not facing this alone, Izira. Never alone." A knock on the door broke the moment. Mary's voice called out, tight with anxiety, "It's time. The council convenes in 2 hours." Izira stood, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly where their daughter kicked strongly. 6 months along, obvious now, a visible reminder of everything at stake. "Then let's go prove that some things are worth fighting for." Drake rose beside her, pulling her into his arms one last time. His kiss was fierce, claiming, a brand of ownership and devotion that left them both breathless. "No matter what happens in that chamber," he murmured against her lips, "you are mine. And I am yours. Nothing the council says can change that." "Nothing," Izira agreed, her hands fisting in his shirt, holding him as tightly as he held her. "I'm yours, Drake. For every lifetime we have." "And I'm yours," he breathed. "For eternity and beyond." They descended to face their fate together, Izira's hand firmly in Drake's, both of them armored in love and determination and the desperate hope that it would be enough. The council chamber was exactly as oppressive as Izira had imagined. She could feel the weight of it, the vast space designed to make individuals feel small, the ancient magic saturating the air, the presence of dozens of powerful beings gathered to pass judgment. Her hand tightened on Drake's arm as they entered. His heat was the only comfort in a room that suddenly felt like a tomb. Dragon Lord Drake, Counselor Thane's voice rang out, formal and cold. You stand accused of harboring property claimed by Alpha Rowan of Nightshade. How do you answer? She's not property, Drake said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, resonating with power and barely controlled fury. She's my mate. And I answer that Rowan forfeited any claim when he publicly rejected her and sold her into slavery. Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members, a susurrus of voices that made Isira's enhanced senses prickle with a dozen different emotions: curiosity, disapproval, interest, disdain. Be that as it may, Thane continued, Alpha Rowan has petitioned for custody of the child. The child is his by blood. Pack law is clear on parental rights. Then hear my case. Rowan's voice came from across the chamber and Isira's entire body went rigid. She could smell him now, earth and smoke, and underneath it all the sickly sweet scent of decay. He was sick. Very sick. Dying. Alpha Rowan, Thane acknowledged. State your claim. Rowan's footsteps approached the center of the chamber. Isira could track him by scent alone, could feel the desperation radiating off him in waves that her enhanced gift read as clearly as words. 3 months ago I made a mistake, Rowan began, his voice carefully modulated for sympathy. I rejected my mate in a moment of anger and confusion. I've regretted it every day since. You sold her, Drake interjected coldly. I was trying to give her a better life than I could provide, Rowan countered smoothly, and Isira's gift screamed lie at the chemical shift in his scent. Dragon Lord Drake has resources I lack. But that doesn't change the fact that the child Isira carries is mine by blood. My heir. My legacy. And I want to be a father to my child. The council members shifted and Isira could sense their emotions changing. Sympathy creeping in, consideration. They were buying it. They were actually buying his manipulation. You're dying, Isira said suddenly, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. You're not here because you want to be a father. You're here because you're out of time. Silence fell like a physical weight. What? Thane's attention sharpened, focusing on Isira with an intensity she could feel across the distance. Rowan's heartbeat spiked, she could hear it, could smell his sudden panic beneath the careful control. I don't know what. Silver poisoning, Isira continued, her enhanced gift reading him like an open book, every micro-expression of scent and sound painting a picture clearer than sight ever could. 6 months ago. The wounds healed but the damage was done. You're sterile now. And dying. You have maybe 6 months left, if that. How dare you, Rowan started, anger flaring in his scent. It's true, isn't it? Isira pressed, taking a step forward despite Drake's warning hand on her shoulder. That's why you want this child so desperately. Not out of love. Not out of paternal devotion. But because you need an heir before you die, and this baby is the only one you'll ever have. The council erupted in whispers, the carefully orchestrated sympathy for Rowan crumbling as Isira's words hit their mark. Is this true, Alpha Rowan? Thane demanded, her ancient voice sharp with displeasure at being manipulated. Rowan was silent for a long moment, and Isira could smell his internal struggle. Lie and risk being caught, or admit the truth and lose his sympathy card. Finally he spoke, his voice raw with bitter honesty. Yes. I was attacked by hunters using silver weapons. The healers confirmed, I'll never father another child. This baby is my only legacy. My only chance to have something of me continue after I'm gone. He paused and his voice hardened. But that doesn't make my claim any less legitimate. The child is mine by blood and I have the right to raise it. But here's what you don't know, Isira said, and she felt power surge beneath her skin as her emotions rose. Control. Stay controlled. This child you're claiming? It's not just Wolf. It's not even just yours. She took a breath, making a choice that could destroy her but might be the only way to save her daughter. It's mine. And I'm not what you think I am. Drake's hand tightened on her shoulder. A warning, a plea. Don't. But Isira had made her decision. She was done hiding. Her eyes blazed gold, and she felt the power manifest as golden wings burst from her back in a cascade of impossible light. Chaos erupted. Hybrid, someone screamed, the word echoing through the chamber like a curse. Chapter 4. Abomination. Kill it. Kill it before. Silence. Drake's roar shook the foundations of the building and he shifted, becoming a massive golden dragon that filled half the chamber, his rage incinerating the air itself with waves of heat and barely restrained violence. Touch her and I burn this entire council to ash. Guards drew weapons, moving to surround them. Council members scattered, some fleeing, others taking defensive positions. And in the center of it all, Izira stood with her wings spread wide, her head held high, her hands protectively cradling her pregnant belly. She refused to cower. Refused to hide. Refused to accept that her existence, that her daughter's existence, was something to be ashamed of. She's illegal, Counselor Thane said, but even she looked shaken by Drake's fury and the sight of Izira's impossible wings gleaming in the chamber's light. Hybrids are forbidden by law. Created through unnatural means, genetic contamination that. Chosen, Drake roared, his dragon form radiating power that made even the guards hesitate. She didn't choose what she was born as any more than you chose to be born small-minded and cruel. But she chooses to stand here and fight for her right to exist. And I choose to stand with her. He shifted back to human form in a ripple of power, gathering Izira into his arms protectively, his body positioned between her and every threat in the room. You want to execute her? You go through me. And I promise you, 3,000 years of accumulated power says you won't survive the attempt. This is madness, Rowan said from somewhere to the side, his voice breaking with what might have been genuine shock or might have been calculated horror. She's a monster. An abomination. The child she carries is contaminated. Enough. The single word shook the entire chamber with power that made even Drake's fury seem small in comparison. Every being in the room froze, their attention snapping to the entrance where a figure stood silhouetted against the light streaming in from outside. A dragon, ancient beyond measure, his presence so overwhelming that several council members actually dropped to their knees in instinctive submission. Aldrich, Thane breathed, rising shakily to her feet. Elder Aldrich. We didn't know you were, we weren't informed. I know what she is, Aldrich said, his voice like mountains grinding together as he walked into the chamber with measured, deliberate steps. His eyes, the same impossible gold as Izira's, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch even as Drake held her tighter. I know exactly what she is. He stopped a few feet away, and when he spoke again, his ancient voice broke with an emotion that 5,000 years of existence couldn't quite contain. She's my daughter. The chamber exploded into chaos again, but Aldrich raised one hand and silence fell like a physical force, absolute and unquestionable. 24 years ago, Aldrich said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space with the weight of absolute truth. I fell in love with a wolf shifter named Lyanna. She was everything I wasn't supposed to want. Fierce, defiant, absolutely unwilling to bow to authority she didn't respect. We knew what we were risking. We knew the council would hunt us. But we chose love anyway. He moved closer to Izira and she could smell him now, ancient stone and sky and something that felt like recognition on a level deeper than conscious thought. Like her DNA remembered him even if her mind didn't. When Lyanna discovered she was pregnant, Aldrich continued, his voice thickening with grief that time hadn't quite healed, we knew we had to run. We made it 3 months before the council found us. They killed her. His voice broke completely. I thought they'd killed our daughter too. I've spent 23 years searching. Tearing through territories, following every rumor, every whisper of a wolf child with strange abilities. And all this time, you were hidden so well I never found you. You're my father? Izira whispered, her entire world reshaping itself yet again in the span of minutes. I am, Aldrich said, and his hand, trembling with 5,000 years of accumulated emotion, touched her face with infinite gentleness. You have your mother's courage. Her impossible, beautiful defiance. Her refusal to accept limits that were never hers to begin with. Tears streamed down Izira's face, and she reached up with one hand to cover his, feeling the heat of dragon fire beneath ancient skin. Why didn't you find me? I tried. Aldrich's voice was thick with self-recrimination and old grief. I destroyed kingdoms searching for you. I tore through pack territories, demanded answers from every alpha who might have seen something. But your aunt, he looked past Izira to where Mary stood frozen in the crowd, she hid you too well. protected you too thoroughly. And for that I owe her everything. Because you're alive. You're here. And you're exactly what your mother hoped you'd be, proof that love is stronger than hatred. He turned back to the council, and his power filled the chamber like a storm about to break, ancient and terrible and absolutely uncompromising. Now, you will listen to me and you will listen well. My daughter is not an abomination. She is proof that our species can evolve beyond fear and prejudice. That love can create something better than what we were born as. And I will not allow you to harm her. Elder Aldrich, Thane said carefully, visibly struggling to maintain her composure and authority in the face of the eldest dragon alive. The law states clearly that hybrids are. I wrote half your laws, Aldrich interrupted quietly, and the threat in his calm voice was more terrifying than any roar. I am the eldest dragon alive. 5,000 years of accumulated wisdom and strength. I've survived the fall of empires and the rise of new civilizations. I've seen laws change and evolve and die when they no longer serve the greater good. And I'm changing this law. Now. You can't simply. I can, Aldrich interrupted again, his power pressing against every being in the chamber like physical weight. And I call for an immediate vote among the council. Declare hybrids legal and grant them full rights and protections, or face me in single combat to defend your precious precedent that my daughter should die for existing. The silence that followed was absolute and suffocating. Izira could sense the council members' emotions through her enhanced gift. Fear warring with pride, tradition battling survival instinct, old prejudices crumbling under the reality of facing the eldest dragon in combat. No one was that foolish. No one wanted to die for a law that suddenly seemed far less important than it had minutes ago. All in favor of amending the hybrid law to grant full legal status and protection, Thane said finally, her voice tight with the knowledge that she'd been outmaneuvered. Signify now. Chapter 5. One by one, hands rose throughout the chamber. Some quickly, eager to be seen supporting the change. Others reluctantly, clearly unhappy but unwilling to face Aldrich's wrath. But within moments, every council member had voted yes. The motion carries unanimously, Thane announced, and Izira heard both resignation and perhaps a hint of relief in the ancient counselor's voice. As of this moment, hybrids are recognized as legitimate citizens with full rights and protections under council law. All previous laws mandating execution are hereby void. Izira's knees went weak with relief, and Drake caught her immediately, his arms wrapping around her from behind, supporting her weight as the magnitude of what had just happened crashed over them both. And regarding the custody dispute, Thane continued, her gaze fixing on Rowan with something that might have been sympathy or might have been contempt. This council finds that Alpha Rowan forfeited all parental rights when he publicly rejected the child, sold the mother into slavery, and demonstrated through his own testimony that his interest in the child stems from desperation rather than genuine paternal devotion. The child will remain with Izira and her chosen mate, Dragon Lord Drake, with full legal recognition of their parental rights. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final blow. Furthermore, Alpha Rowan is hereby banned from approaching Izira, Dragon Lord Drake or the child. Any violation of this order will result in immediate execution. This ruling is final and binding. Rowan's face went white, then twisted with a combination of rage, grief and bitter understanding that he'd lost everything. You can't. That child is my blood, my only chance at. You should have thought of that before you violated, rejected and sold her mother, Thane said coldly. This council may have its flaws, but we will not reward violence and abandonment with custody rights. The child will be raised by people who chose to love her, not by a man who saw her as a commodity. You've destroyed me, Rowan whispered, his eyes finding Izira across the chamber. She could smell his desperation turning to hatred, a bitter toxic cloud that made her gift recoil. You've taken everything. No, Izira said softly, her voice carrying through the chamber with surprising strength despite her exhaustion. You destroyed yourself when you chose cruelty over compassion, violence over respect, possession over partnership. I just refuse to let you destroy me too. She paused, and despite everything he'd done, she found room for something that might have been pity. I hope you find peace in whatever time you have left, Rowan. But that peace won't include my daughter. It was more mercy than he deserved, and from the shocked silence in the chamber, everyone knew it. Rowan turned and stumbled from the chamber, broken and dying, his desperate gambit for legacy crumbling to ash around him. Several guards moved to escort him to the border, ensuring he would actually leave and not attempt anything foolish in his desperation. Thane stood, signaling the formal end of the hearing. This council is adjourned. Aizira, daughter of Aldrich, welcome. You are recognized, protected, and free to live without fear of persecution. May you use your unique existence to build bridges between our peoples. The words washed over Aizira like absolution, like healing, like finally, being seen for what she was and not found wanting. Her wings retracted, folding back into her body with practiced ease now that she'd learned control. Her eyes faded from gold to brown. And she turned in Drake's arms, buried her face against his chest, and let herself break down with relief so intense it felt like dying and being reborn all at once. It's over, Drake murmured against her hair, his own voice thick with emotion as he held her like she was the most precious thing in existence. You're safe. You're mine. You're free. And no one will ever take you from me again. Ours, Aldrich said quietly, stepping closer and placing a gentle hand on Aizira's shoulder. She's ours now. All of us. The family she deserves. Aizira reached out blindly and her biological father's hand found hers, warm and solid and real. For the first time in 23 years she had a father who claimed her. A mate who chose her. A future that was hers to decide. Mary pushed through the crowd, sobbing openly as she threw her arms around Aizira from the side, completing the circle of people who'd fought for her, who'd never given up, who'd proven that family was about choice and sacrifice, not blood and obligation. You did it, Mary whispered fiercely. You stood before the council and demanded they see your worth, and they had no choice but to agree. I'm so proud of you, little warrior. So incredibly proud. They stood together, Aizira, Drake, Aldrich, and Mary, in the center of the council chamber while members filed out around them, some nodding respectfully, others avoiding eye contact, all of them changed by what they'd witnessed. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Aizira allowed herself to believe it might actually be over. That she and her daughter might actually be safe. 2 months passed in a blur of adjustment and cautious joy. Aldrich took up residence in a wing of Drake's fortress, spending hours with Aizira teaching her about her dragon heritage, sharing stories of Lyanna that made his daughter laugh and cry in equal measure. Mary stayed too, finally able to shed the weight of 23 years of secrets and simply be an aunt who loved her niece without fear. And Drake. Drake was everywhere and nowhere, hovering protectively while trying not to smother, his ancient instincts screaming at him to guard his pregnant mate with every resource at his disposal. I'm fine, Aizira insisted for what felt like the 100th time as Drake adjusted her pillows yet again. She was 8 months pregnant now, her belly enormous, and their daughter had inherited her father's restless energy, kicking constantly. You're carrying the first legally recognized dragon-wolf hybrid in history, Drake countered, his hand settling protectively on her swollen stomach. You're making history. You're allowed to be pampered. I'm going to strangle you with love if you don't stop fussing, Aizira threatened, but she was smiling, one hand covering his where it rested on her belly. Try it, Drake said, leaning down to press a kiss to her stomach where their daughter kicked strongly in response. Your mother might strangle me, little one, but at least I'd die knowing I took care of you both. Chapter 6. Aurora. They'd already chosen the name, meaning dawn, a new beginning after so much darkness, kicked again as if in agreement, and they both laughed at her spirit. But laughter turned to urgency 2 nights later when Aizira woke to wetness soaking the bed and pain rippling through her abdomen in waves. Drake, she gasped, reaching for him in the darkness. It's time. He was awake instantly, his heat flaring as panic and excitement warred in his scent. Now. But you're not due for another. Tell that to our daughter, Aizira managed through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. She's coming whether we're ready or not. The next hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Drake refused to leave her side despite the midwife's protests that birth was no place for men, dragon or otherwise. Aldrich and Mary waited outside, their anxiety a palpable presence even through the closed door. And Aizira labored with gritted teeth and determination, Drake's hand in hers, his voice a constant anchor as pain threatened to sweep her away. You can do this, he murmured over and over, his free hand cool against her sweat-soaked forehead even as she crushed his other hand hard enough to break mortal bones. You're the strongest person I've ever known. You can do anything. But as the hours stretched and the pain intensified, the midwife's expression grew concerned. Izira could smell the worry, could sense something was wrong even before the ancient dragon spoke. The wings, the midwife said quietly to Drake, thinking Izira couldn't hear through her pain. They're catching. The baby's wings are manifesting and they're preventing descent. If we don't get her out soon. What do you need? Drake demanded, his voice hard with barely controlled fear. Dragon fire, the midwife said. Controlled and precise. I need to warm and loosen the birth canal, create space for the wings to fold. But it's dangerous. One wrong move and I could burn them both. Then I'll do it, Drake said immediately. You're not trained for. I have 3,000 years of controlling my fire, Drake interrupted. I can do this. Tell me what you need. What followed was a delicate, terrifying dance of power and precision. Drake channeled his dragon fire through the midwife's hands, warming Izira's body from the inside, creating the space their daughter needed. And Izira pushed with everything she had, screaming through the pain, her own dragon power flaring unconsciously in response to the stress. Golden light filled the room. Her wings manifested briefly, spreading wide before folding back. And with one last desperate push, Aurora entered the world in a rush of fluid and blood and the most beautiful sound Izira had ever heard, her daughter's furious, healthy cries. A girl, the midwife announced, laughing with relief as she cleared the infant's airways and placed the squirming, screaming bundle on Izira's chest. A perfect, angry, absolutely beautiful girl. Izira sobbed as her daughter settled against her skin, tiny and warm and impossibly real. Her hands explored Aurora carefully. Small face still scrunched with indignation, delicate fingers that wrapped immediately around Izira's thumb, and yes, there against her back, the unmistakable nubs of wings folded tight against tiny shoulder blades. She's perfect, Drake breathed, and when Izira turned her face toward him she could smell the salt of his tears, could sense the overwhelming emotion radiating from him in waves. She's absolutely perfect. He leaned down, and his lips found Izira's in a kiss that tasted of relief and joy and 3,000 years of loneliness finally, completely healed by the family they'd created together. Aurora, Izira whispered, looking down at their daughter even though she couldn't see her face. But she could smell her, that unique scent that was purely Aurora, a blend of wolf and dragon and something entirely new. Aurora Mary. For dawn after darkness and for the woman who saved us both. Aurora Mary, Drake repeated, his finger carefully held by his daughter's tiny fist. Our impossible miracle. Our proof that love is stronger than law, stronger than prejudice, stronger than anything the world tried to use against us. The midwife finished her work and quietly withdrew, giving them privacy. Moments later, Aldrich and Mary burst in, both crying openly at the sight of the new family. Hey, Aldrich asked, his ancient voice trembling as he approached. Izira carefully transferred Aurora to her grandfather's arms, and the eldest dragon alive, who'd survived 5 millennia of war and loss and grief, wept at the sight of his granddaughter, the continuation of a bloodline he'd thought ended with Lyanna's death. Hello, little one, he whispered, looking down at Aurora's tiny face, her golden eyes, his eyes, already open and curious despite being only minutes old. You're the future. You're everything your grandmother dreamed of when she chose to have your mother despite knowing it would cost her everything. Mary approached next and Aldrich carefully placed Aurora in her arms. Mary's tears fell onto the baby's blanket as she gazed at the child she'd fought to protect by protecting Izira all these years. Your mother is a warrior, Mary told Aurora softly. She stood before the council and demanded they see her worth. She's going to teach you to be just as brave, just as fierce, just as unwilling to accept limits that were never yours to begin with. Aurora yawned, her tiny wings fluttering briefly, and the sight was so impossibly precious that even Drake had to turn away to hide fresh tears. They passed Aurora around, each of them getting their turn to hold her, to welcome her to a family that had been forged through sacrifice and choice rather than blood and obligation. And when Aurora was finally settled back in Izira's arms, nursing contentedly, Drake climbed into the bed beside them and wrapped his arms around both his mate and his daughter. Thank you, he whispered against Izira's hair. For surviving. For fighting. For giving me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. Thank you, Izira whispered back, her free hand finding his face, tracing the familiar features she'd memorized through touch. For seeing me when no one else would. For loving me when everyone else said I was broken. For choosing us. Always, Drake promised and kissed her softly, carefully, reverently. For every lifetime we have and every lifetime beyond. Aurora made a small sound of contentment, already falling asleep between her parents, safe and warm and loved beyond measure. And for 3 perfect months, they lived in that happiness, believing the worst was finally behind them. They were wrong. Chapter 7. 3 months after Aurora's birth, a letter arrived. Izira was in the garden, Aurora sleeping peacefully in a bassinet beside her while Izira practiced her flute, the one Aunt Mary had given her years ago, back when she'd been a different person living a different life. The music was soft, a lullaby she'd been composing for her daughter, and she didn't sense the messenger's arrival until Corvus cleared his throat. "A letter," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "From Patricia." Izira's hands stilled on the flute, her entire body going rigid. "What? Corvus hesitated. "The woman who raised you. She's requesting permission to visit. To meet Aurora." The letter was in Braille, translated by some scribe Patricia must have hired. Izira's fingers traced the raised dots, reading words that twisted like knives in her chest. "Dearest Izira, I know I have no right to ask this after everything that happened. But I've spent the last year thinking about the mistakes I made, the ways I failed you. I was wrong to treat you as less than. Wrong to resent your presence in our home. Wrong to stand by while you suffered. I'm asking for a chance to make amends. To meet my granddaughter. To show you that people can change, that regret can transform into action. Please, give me this one chance to be the family member you deserved all along. With hope and humility, Patricia." Izira's hands trembled as she set the letter aside. Her gift screamed warnings. Something felt wrong about the words, about the sentiment, about the timing. But she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. "What do you think?" she asked Corvus quietly. "I think," Corvus said carefully, "that you should discuss this with Drake before making any decisions." He was right, of course. But something in Izira, some small wounded part that had never quite healed from childhood, wanted to believe Patricia could change. Wanted to believe that maybe, finally, the woman who'd raised her might actually see her worth. That evening she showed the letter to Drake. His reaction was immediate and visceral. "Absolutely not." "But..." "No," Drake said firmly, his heat flaring with protective fury. "She facilitated your abuse for 23 years. She stood by while you suffered. She took Mary's money to tolerate your existence. And now she wants to meet Aurora? No." "I know," Izira said quietly. "I know all of that. But Drake, what if she really has changed? What if she hasn't?" Drake countered, pulling Izira into his arms. "What if this is some manipulation? What if she hurts you again? Then you'll be there to protect me," Izira said, leaning into his warmth. "One supervised visit. Here in the fortress with you and Aldrich present. If she does or says anything wrong, she's gone immediately. But I need to know. I need to see if there's any chance." She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't articulate the desperate hope that maybe, somehow, she could have some piece of the family she'd been born into along with the family she'd chosen. Drake held her for a long moment before finally sighing. "One visit. Supervised. And at the first sign of anything wrong, she's out." "Agreed." "Agreed," Izira whispered and tried to ignore the way her gift continued to scream warnings she couldn't quite interpret. Patricia arrived 2 weeks later, and from the moment she entered the fortress, Izira's unease intensified. The woman's scent was wrong, anxiety and calculation mixed with something that smelled like greed, like envy, like bitter resentment barely masked under false sweetness. "Izira," Patricia said, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth as she entered the sitting room where Izira waited with Aurora in her arms, Drake standing protectively behind them and Aldrich seated nearby. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Patricia," Izira replied carefully, her enhanced gift reading every micro-expression in the woman's scent. Fear. Nervousness. But also, anticipation? Excitement? Something was off. "May I see her?" Patricia asked, stepping closer. "Aurora. May I hold my granddaughter?" Every instinct screamed at Izira to say no. But she was trying to give Patricia a chance, trying to believe in redemption and change. Slowly, reluctantly, she held Aurora out. Patricia took the baby with practiced ease. She'd raised 2 children of her own after all, and Izira forced herself to relax despite the way her gift continued to shriek warnings. "She's beautiful," Patricia cooed, and for a moment her voice held genuine wonder. "Those golden wings. That perfect face. She's extraordinary. She's everything," Drake said quietly, his hand finding Izira's shoulder. Patricia looked up, and Izira caught the flash of something ugly in her scent. Resentment, jealousy, that familiar bitterness that had colored so much of Izira's childhood. "You've done well for yourself," Patricia said to Izira, her tone artificially bright. "Dragon mate. Beautiful daughter. Legal recognition. Quite the rise from the blind burden you used to be." The words landed like slaps, and Izira felt Drake tense behind her. "I was never a burden," Izira said quietly. "I was a child who needed care. That you chose to see it as a burden says more about you than me." Patricia's smile tightened. "Of course. You're right. That was insensitive of me." She looked back down at Aurora, her fingers tracing the baby's tiny wings. "She's worth a fortune, you know. A legally recognized hybrid. There are collectors who would pay kingdoms for her." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees as both Drake and Aldrich radiated sudden, deadly menace. "That's enough," Aldrich said quietly, standing. "I think this visit is over." "I didn't mean," Patricia started, but her scent betrayed her. Relief. Satisfaction. Like she'd gotten the information she came for. She handed Aurora back to Izira, her movements just a fraction too eager, like she couldn't wait to be rid of the responsibility. "Thank you for letting me see her. She really is remarkable." As Corvus escorted Patricia out, Izira held Aurora close and tried to shake the feeling that she'd just made a terrible mistake. "You felt it too," Drake said quietly after Patricia was gone. "Something's wrong," Izira agreed. Her questions about Aurora, where she sleeps, whether we have guards, what my routine is. She trailed off, her gift finally piecing together what her conscious mind hadn't wanted to acknowledge. She wasn't here to make amends. She was here to gather information. For whom? Aldrich asked, but they all knew the answer even before Izira spoke it. Rowan. She's working with Rowan. Drake's curse shook the walls, and he immediately called for increased guards, for magical wards, for every protection he could think of. But even as they scrambled to secure the fortress, a voice in Izira's head whispered that it was already too late. That night she held Aurora close and refused to sleep, listening to every sound, her gift stretched to its limits, trying to sense any threat before it could materialize. "Sleep," Drake urged, his arms wrapped around both of them. "I've got watch. I won't let anything happen." But Izira couldn't sleep. Her gift screamed warnings she still couldn't fully interpret, and some instinct deeper than reason told her that the worst was yet to come. She should have trusted that instinct. She should have run. But by the time she understood the full extent of the betrayal, it was already too late. Chapter 8. 3 nights after Patricia's visit, Izira woke to silence. Wrong silence. Aurora's usual baby sounds, the soft breathing, the occasional sleepy coos, were absent. And the air in the room smelled wrong. Felt wrong. "Drake," Izira whispered, her hand reaching for him. "Drake, wake up." He was awake instantly, his warrior instincts honed by 3,000 years of survival. "What?" "Aurora," Izira gasped, already moving toward the bassinet beside their bed. Her hands found soft blankets, but they were cold. "No," she breathed, her entire world narrowing to that one terrible word. "No, no, no." Drake was there in an instant, his heat flaring as he confirmed what Izira already knew in her soul. Aurora was gone. The window stood open, night air streaming in cold and mocking. And there on the nightstand, pinned beneath a rock so it wouldn't blow away, was a note in Patricia's handwriting. Drake read it aloud, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Rowan offered me 10,000 gold pieces for the child. Enough to save Mason and Brenna from the poverty your existence cost us. You can make more babies with your dragon. This is my family's only chance to escape the debts we accumulated feeding and housing you for 23 years. Don't follow us. By the time you read this, we'll be long gone. Consider this payment for all the years I spent raising a child that wasn't even mine." Izira collapsed. Her scream shattered every window in the fortress. a sound of pure maternal anguish that brought Aldrich, Mary, Corvus and every guard running. But all Isira could sense was Aurora's terror, fading with distance, her daughter's warmth and innocence being carried away into darkness by a woman who'd sold her for gold. Find her, Isira managed through sobs that threatened to tear her apart. Drake, find our daughter. Please. He shifted immediately, becoming a massive golden dragon that burst through the roof in his desperation to take to the sky. His roar of fury and fear echoed for miles as he launched after the scent trail, following Aurora's unique scent through the night. Aldrich stayed with Isira, holding her as she shook apart, while Mary stood frozen in the doorway, her face white with horror and rage. Patricia, Mary whispered, her voice raw. She sold her own grandniece. She sold Aurora. For gold, Isira sobbed against Aldrich's chest. She sold my baby for gold. The next hour was the longest of Isira's life. She sat on the floor of the nursery, her gift stretched to its absolute limit, following the echo of Aurora's fear and Patricia's triumph and Rowan's desperate hope as they moved farther and farther away. Until finally Drake returned. Alone. I tracked them to the border of neutral territory, he said, his voice hoarse from roaring and smoking with barely controlled fire. There's an old fortress there. Abandoned. But I saw movement guards. Rowan has her Isira. He has Aurora and the fortress is heavily warded. I can't break through without. His voice broke. Without risking killing her in the collapse. Then we find another way, Aldrich said, his ancient voice hard as diamonds. We go there. We negotiate. We take her back. But even as they made plans, an courier arrived at the fortress gates with another message. This one from Rowan himself. I have the hybrid child. In 48 hours I will perform a blood magic ritual that will extend my life by absorbing her power. If Isira wants to say goodbye to her daughter, she may come alone. Anyone else and the child dies immediately. These are my terms. This is not negotiable. Come alone or watch your daughter die screaming. You took everything from me, Isira. My health. My future. My chance at legacy. Now I'm taking everything from you. Consider us even. Isira's hands crushed the paper, her rage so hot that it actually caught fire, burning to ash in her grip. I'll kill him, she whispered, her eyes blazing gold, her wings bursting out unconsciously. I'll tear him apart with my bare hands. We'll kill him together, Drake corrected, pulling her into his arms even as her wings spread around them both. But first we get Aurora back. And we don't do it by playing his games. Mary stepped forward, her voice quiet but determined. I have an idea. But you're not going to like it. Mary's idea was simple and terrible. Use Patricia as leverage. She's there with Rowan, Mary said, her voice tight with fury at the woman who'd taken her payments for 23 years while resenting every moment. She has access to Aurora. We offer her more gold than Rowan paid, double, triple, to betray him and help us get Aurora out. She won't do it, Isira said bitterly. You didn't smell her, Mary. The greed wasn't just about money. She wants me to suffer. Wants me to lose Aurora the way she thinks she lost Mason and Brenna's futures to my existence. Then we don't give her a choice, Drake said, his voice deadly calm in the way that meant he was most dangerous. We take her by force. Make her help us. They sent scouts to locate Patricia, and found her staying at an inn near Rowan's fortress, presumably waiting for her payment once the ritual was complete. The scouts brought her back, none too gently, and threw her into a secure room in Drake's fortress. Isira stood before her, wings out, eyes blazing gold, every inch of her radiating the power and fury of a mother whose child had been stolen. Where is my daughter? Isira asked, her voice deadly quiet. Patricia's fear was palpable, but underneath it, Isira could smell something worse, satisfaction. Pride. The pleasure of having finally hurt Isira the way she'd always wanted to. Safe, Patricia said, trying for defiance despite her obvious terror. Rowan has her. And you'll never get her back. You sold your own grandniece, Mary said from the doorway, her voice shaking with rage. I paid you for 23 years to care for Isira. To love her. And this is how you repay that. By selling her child. You paid me to tolerate a burden, Patricia spat, her true feelings finally erupting through the pretense. Every meal she ate, every piece of clothing she wore, every moment of my time, it all should have gone to my real children. Mason and Brenna suffered because of her. And now finally I can make that right. How much did Rowan pay you? Drake asked quietly. 10,000 gold pieces, Patricia said, and her smile was ugly with greed. Enough to clear every debt, set up both my children with businesses, ensure they never struggle again. I'll give you 20,000, Drake said flatly. Help us get Aurora back and you walk away with double what Rowan promised. Patricia's expression flickered. Calculation, temptation. But then she shook her head. No. Why not? Izira demanded. Because Rowan promised me something better than gold, Patricia said, and her smile turned vicious. A share of the ritual's power. 20 extra years of life. I'll outlive my miserable husband, watch my children thrive, and never have to think about you again. That's worth more than any amount of money. Chapter 9. Izira's enhanced gift caught the truth beneath the words. Patricia didn't just want the years. She wanted to be part of something that destroyed Izira. Wanted to watch Izira lose everything the way Patricia felt she'd been losing all her life. Then you're of no use to us, Aldrich said quietly, and the menace in his ancient voice made Patricia go pale. You can't kill me, she whispered. The council. The council granted my daughter full legal protection, Aldrich interrupted. Which includes the right to defend her child against kidnappers. You're lucky I'm not burning you to ash where you stand. Lock her up, Drake ordered Corvus. We'll deal with her after we have Aurora back. As guards dragged Patricia away screaming threats and curses, Izira turned to Drake with tears streaming down her face. We're running out of time, she whispered. 48 hours. How do we? We assault the fortress, Drake said grimly. Direct attack. Overwhelming force. We break through the wards, we kill anyone who stands between us and Aurora, and we bring our daughter home. And if Rowan kills her before we reach her? Izira asked, voicing the fear that had been choking her since Aurora disappeared. Then he doesn't survive long enough to regret it, Drake said, his voice promising death and devastation. But we try anyway because the alternative is giving up, and I will burn the world to ash before I give up on our daughter. Together, Izira said, her hand finding his. Together, Drake agreed and sealed it with a kiss that tasted of desperation and determination. Hours later, as they finalized their assault plans, Corvus burst into the war room with grim news. She's gone, he said, his voice tight with fury. Patricia escaped. She slipped past the guards during the shift change and vanished into the night. Izira's blood ran cold. She's going to warn Rowan. She's going to. We know, Drake interrupted, his jaw clenched. Which means we attack now. Before she reaches him, before he has time to prepare additional defenses. We move at dawn. They attacked at first light. Drake, Aldrich, Corvus, and 10 of the fortress's best warriors launched a coordinated assault on Rowan's fortified location. Izira insisted on coming, and no amount of arguing would change her mind. She's my daughter, Izira said fiercely when Drake tried one last time to convince her to stay behind. I'm not waiting here while you fight for her. If there's even a chance she can smell me, sense me, know her mother is coming, I have to be there. So she went, her enhanced senses guiding her through the battle that erupted the moment they breached the outer wards. The fighting was brutal. Rowan had hired mercenaries, wolves and bears, and even a few rogue dragons who cared more about gold than honor. But none of them were prepared for the fury of 2 ancient dragons fighting to save their granddaughter, or a mate protecting his child, or a blind mother who could sense every enemy's intention before they moved. Izira fought with claws and power she'd never fully unleashed before, her wings giving her mobility, her gift letting her predict attacks before they came. She was magnificent and terrifying, and the mercenaries who didn't flee outright died quickly. They breached the inner fortress, cutting through guards and wards, leaving destruction in their wake. And finally they reached the chamber where Rowan waited. He stood in the center of a ritual circle, Aurora in his arms, a knife gleaming at her throat. Patricia stood beside him, her expression a mixture of fear and anticipation. She'd made it to Rowan after all, and whatever warning she'd given him hadn't been enough to stop their assault. Aurora was crying, her tiny face red with distress, her baby wings fluttering uselessly as she sensed the danger she was in but couldn't understand it. Aurora! Izira screamed, taking a step forward before Drake's arm shot out to stop her. Another step and I slit her throat right now, Rowan said calmly, and the knife pressed just hard enough to make Aurora wail louder. I mean it, Izira. One more step and your daughter dies before your eyes, well, in your case before your enhanced senses. Same result. Izira froze, every muscle in her body screaming to rush forward, to rip Aurora from his arms, to destroy anyone who threatened her child. But the knife was too close and she could smell Rowan's desperation, the kind that made people capable of anything. What do you want? Drake demanded, his voice vibrating with barely restrained violence. I want what I've always wanted, Rowan said. More time. This ritual will give me that. Your daughter's hybrid power is unique, potent enough to extend my life by decades. Maybe longer. You'll kill her, Aldrich said, his ancient voice heavy with certainty. That kind of power drain will destroy an infant. Probably, Rowan agreed without remorse. But I'm dying anyway. At least this way I get to live. She's going to die sometime, might as well make it useful. You're a monster, Mary whispered from beside Izira, her voice breaking. I'm a survivor, Rowan corrected. Now I'm willing to make a trade. The child's life for a worthy substitute. Someone whose life force is strong enough to give me what I need without requiring her death. Take me, Drake said immediately, stepping forward without hesitation. I'm 3,000 years old. Ancient dragon life force. It's worth far more than an infant's. Take me instead. Rowan's expression flickered with interest. Tempting. Very tempting. The power in you alone could give me centuries. He was actually considering it. Izira could smell the calculation, the weighing of options. And she could feel Drake's resignation. He'd already decided. Already chosen to sacrifice himself for Aurora. No, Izira said, her voice breaking. Drake, no, you can't. Yes, I can, Drake said, not taking his eyes off Rowan. Aurora is 3 months old. You're 6 months out from carrying her. You need time to heal, to recover. And she needs her mother. So yes, I can do this. I will do this. Drake, please. Izira reached for him, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Drake said, finally turning to look at her, his eyes blazing with 3,000 years of emotion distilled into this one moment. I love you more than I've loved anything in all my years of existence. And that's why I can do this. Because loving you, loving her, is worth everything. No, Izira sobbed, but she could already feel him pulling away, stepping toward Rowan and the ritual circle. Wait, Mary said suddenly, her voice cutting through the moment like a blade. Take me instead. Everyone froze. Chapter 10. Aunt Mary, Izira started. Take me, Mary repeated, stepping forward with her head held high. I'm old. I've lived my life. I have no children of my own, no mate waiting for me. But Izira and Aurora, they have centuries ahead of them. And Drake. She looked at the ancient dragon who'd been prepared to die. You have so much life left to live with them. So much love to give. Don't waste it. You're not worth enough, Rowan said dismissively. An old wolf versus an ancient dragon? The power differential is. But I'm worth enough to save time, Mary interrupted. You said yourself the ritual takes hours. Hours you might not have if they call for reinforcements, if the council hears about this. I'm here now. My life force may not give you centuries, but it'll give you years. Enough years to make it worth your while. She looked at Izira, and her expression was peaceful despite the tears streaming down her face. Let me do this, little warrior. Let me give you and Aurora the chance I fought for 23 years to protect. This is my choice. My sacrifice. Accept it. No, Izira whispered, but Mary was already walking toward the ritual circle, her steps steady despite her fear. Mary, don't, Drake said, reaching for her. But Mary brushed past him, her attention fixed on Rowan. Do we have a deal? My life for Aurora's release. Rowan considered, his dying body clearly visible in the pallor of his skin, the shake in his hands. He was running out of time and they both knew it. Fine, he said finally. Your life for the child. But Patricia gets her share of the years. 5 years as agreed. No. Izira lunged forward, but Aldrich caught her, holding her back as Mary entered the ritual circle. Aurora was released, passed to Corvus, who immediately brought her to Izira. The baby screamed for her mother, and Izira crushed her daughter against her chest, sobbing into Aurora's soft hair while her heart broke. Don't do this, Izira begged Mary. Please, there has to be another way. There isn't, Mary said gently, kneeling in the center of the circle as Rowan began the ritual preparations. And even if there was, I'd still choose this. You were always worth fighting for, Isira. Always worth protecting. And Aurora, she looked at the baby crying in Isira's arms. She's the future. The proof that love is stronger than hate. Let me make sure she gets to grow up knowing that. I love you, Isira sobbed. You were more of a mother to me than Patricia ever was. I love you. I love you too, Mary whispered, tears streaming down her face as the ritual circle began to glow. Take care of her. Teach Aurora about me. Tell her that her namesake chose love. That's all that matters in the end. The love we choose, the sacrifices we make, the family we build from choice rather than blood. The ritual began. Isira watched through her enhanced senses, feeling every moment as Mary's life force was pulled from her body and transferred into Rowan. The older woman aged rapidly, her strong body withering, her heartbeat slowing. Patricia stood beside Rowan, also receiving the stolen years, her skin smoothing, her posture straightening as she became younger at Mary's expense. Thank you, Mary whispered, her eyes finding Isira one last time. For being worth it. For proving that I was right to fight for you. For becoming everything I knew you could be. Her eyes closed. Her breathing stopped. And Mary, the woman who'd saved Isira as an infant, protected her for 23 years, and now died so her niece and grandniece could live, was gone. Isira's scream shattered every window in the fortress. Aurora wailed in harmony with her mother's grief. And something inside Isira that had been holding back, trying to be controlled, trying to be civilized, it broke. Her eyes blazed pure gold. Her wings exploded outward with enough force to crack the stone walls. And the power that had been carefully contained since the council hearing erupted like a volcano that had been dormant too long. Rowan staggered out of the ritual circle, looking healthier, stronger, years of decay reversed. Patricia stood beside him, practically glowing with stolen youth. They were both smiling. That smile lasted exactly 3 seconds before Isira handed Aurora to Aldrich and launched herself at Rowan with a fury that would have terrified gods. What happened next would be spoken about in hushed whispers for generations. Isira moved with speed that should have been impossible, her enhanced senses predicting Rowan's every defensive move before he made it. Her claws, wolf claws elongated and strengthened by dragon fire, raked across his chest, drawing blood that sizzled where it hit the ground. You killed her, Isira snarled, her voice barely recognizable, distorted by grief and rage and power that had finally been unleashed without restraint. You killed the only mother I ever had. Rowan tried to fight back, tried to use his newly stolen years to defend himself. But those years came from Mary's peaceful life, not from warrior training or combat experience. And Isira had survived 23 years of systematic abuse, 3 months of captivity, a council hearing, and now the loss of the one person who'd loved her unconditionally. He was unstoppable. Drake moved to help, but Aldrich held him back with one ancient hand. No, Aldrich said quietly. This is hers. Let her have it. So they watched, Drake, Aldrich, Corvus, and the few surviving mercenaries who were too terrified to flee, as Isira tore into Rowan with everything she had. She was magnificent. Terrible. A force of nature wearing the shape of a blind wolf-dragon hybrid who'd been pushed past every breaking point and found something harder than diamond on the other side. Her wings gave her mobility, sweeping her up and around Rowan's desperate attacks. Her enhanced senses meant she knew where he'd strike before he did. And her hybrid power, wolf ferocity combined with dragon fire, made her devastating in ways that defied description. She broke his arm with a strike that shattered bone, tore open his side with claws wreathed in flames, burned him with dragon fire that she'd learned to channel through pure instinct and maternal rage. And through it all she spoke. Chapter 11. This is for drugging me, she said, her claws raking across his face. For violating me when I couldn't fight back. For rejecting me, another strike, this one to his ribs, cracking them audibly. For calling our daughter a bastard. For selling me like cattle, she grabbed his throat, her hand burning hot enough to sear flesh. For treating me like I was disposable. For threatening Aurora. She threw him across the room with strength that shouldn't have been possible, his body hitting the wall hard enough to crack stone. For holding a knife to my daughter's throat. For killing Mary, Her voice broke on the name, but her fury only intensified. For stealing her life. For taking away the only person who ever chose to love me. She stalked toward where Rowan lay broken and bleeding, his stolen years already fading as his body couldn't sustain the damage she'd inflicted. He tried to speak, tried to beg or threaten or bargain. Isira didn't care which. You took everything from me once, she said, standing over him, her eyes blazing with golden fire, her wings spread wide and terrible. My innocence. My trust. My family. And today you took Mary. You took the woman who saved me, who protected me, who died so my daughter could live. She knelt beside him, one clawed hand wrapping around his throat, squeezing just tight enough to make breathing difficult but not impossible. She wanted him conscious for this. Wanted him to feel it. I was going to let you die slowly, Isira whispered, her face close to his, her enhanced senses drinking in his terror like wine. Let you bleed out while thinking about everything you lost. But Mary deserves better than that. She deserves a quick end to the monster who killed her. Please, Rowan gasped, the stolen years already fading from his features as his body gave out. I was desperate, I was dying. So was she, Isira interrupted coldly. But she chose to die with grace, with purpose, sacrificing herself so others could live. You're dying because you chose cruelty over compassion, violence over respect, possession over love. And I want you to know in these last moments, that your daughter will grow up never knowing your name. Never knowing you existed. Because you don't deserve to be remembered. Her claws tightened, and with a surge of dragon fire that burned white-hot and absolute, she ended him. Rowan's body went still, his eyes empty, his stolen years evaporating like smoke. And Isira stayed kneeling there, her hands still around his throat, breathing hard, covered in blood and ash and the weight of what she'd just done. Isira, Drake's voice, gentle and careful, broke through the red haze. It's done. He's gone. She looked up at him and the gold faded from her eyes, leaving them brown and infinitely tired. He killed her, she whispered. Mary is dead because of him. I know, Drake said, kneeling beside her and pulling her into his arms despite the blood and fire still clinging to her. I know, little wolf. And he paid for it. Justice is done. But it didn't feel like justice. It felt like loss. Like the kind of victory that tasted like ash because the cost had been too high. Patricia, Isira said suddenly, her head whipping around as her gift found the other person in the room who'd benefited from Mary's death. Where is Patricia? They found her trying to sneak out through a side exit, still glowing with the 5 stolen years that made her look a decade younger than she had hours ago. Aldrich caught her with casual ease, dragging her back into the ritual chamber and throwing her at Isira's feet. Please, Patricia begged, looking up at Isira with none of the vicious satisfaction she'd shown earlier. Please, I didn't know, I thought. You thought you'd get rich and young watching my daughter die, Isira said flatly, standing over the woman who'd raised her for 23 years and felt nothing but resentment the entire time. You sold Aurora for gold and stolen years. You stood by while Rowan killed Mary. And now you're begging for mercy. I'm your mother, Patricia whispered desperately. You can't, I raised you. You were paid to raise me, Isira interrupted, her voice hard as diamond. Every day for 23 years, Mary paid you to tolerate my existence. You're not my mother. You were a landlord who resented her tenant. And I'm done pretending otherwise. He turned to Aldrich. Can you reverse the ritual? Take back the years she stole? Yes, Aldrich said, understanding immediately. But it will hurt. Badly. Good, Isira said without an ounce of pity. Do it. What followed was Patricia's screaming as Aldrich performed the counter-ritual, ripping the 5 stolen years out of her body and returning her to her true age. She aged rapidly, her smooth skin wrinkling, her straight posture bending, all the youth and vitality she'd murdered Mary to obtain vanishing like it had never existed. When it was done, Patricia lay on the floor sobbing, looking exactly as old as she had before, with nothing to show for her betrayal except the memory of what she'd done. Now, Isira said, her voice cold and final, you're going to answer for your crimes. Kidnapping. Accessory to murder. Conspiracy to commit infanticide. The council will hear what you've done. No, Patricia gasped. Please, not the council, they'll exile me, I'll have nothing. You'll have exactly what you deserve, Isira said. Which is nothing. No family. No money. No future. You sold all of that when you sold my daughter. She turned away, unable to look at Patricia anymore without feeling sick. Corvus, take her to the council. Let them decide her fate. I don't care what they do with her as long as I never have to see her again. As guards dragged Patricia away, still crying and begging, Izira walked to where Aurora lay sleeping in Drake's arms, exhausted from crying. She took her daughter carefully, holding her close, breathing in her scent, warmth and innocence and home. She's safe, Drake said softly, his hand on Izira's back. Aurora is safe. You did it. Mary did it, Izira corrected, her voice breaking. Mary saved her. Saved us both. And I can never. Chapter 12. She couldn't finish. Couldn't articulate the grief that felt like it would swallow her whole. Mary was gone. The woman who'd saved her as an infant, protected her for 23 years, and died so her niece and grandniece could live, was gone. And nothing, not vengeance, not justice, not even Aurora safe in her arms, could bring her back. They brought Mary's body back to the fortress with all the honor due a fallen warrior. Wrapped in fine cloth, carried by Aldrich himself, treated with the reverence she'd earned through a lifetime of quiet heroism. Izira couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function through the fog of grief that threatened to drown her. She held Aurora constantly, terrified to let her daughter out of her sight even for a moment, but even her baby's presence couldn't quite fill the hole Mary's death had left. You need to rest, Drake urged gently as night fell 3 days after Mary's death. You haven't slept since. Since my aunt died saving my daughter? Izira finished bitterly. I can't sleep, Drake. Every time I close my eyes I see her. Hear her last words. Feel her life draining away. She made a choice, Drake said, pulling Izira into his arms while Aurora dozed between them. A choice she was proud to make. Don't dishonor that by destroying yourself with guilt. How can I not feel guilty? Izira whispered. She died because of me. Because I was foolish enough to let Patricia visit. Because I wanted to believe. Her voice broke. I wanted to believe someone from the family that raised me could actually love me. That's not foolish, Drake said fiercely. That's human. That's hope. And Mary would never want you to lose that hope just because Patricia was too broken to deserve it. They sat in silence for a long time, holding each other and Aurora, trying to figure out how to keep breathing in a world where Mary no longer existed. The funeral was held in the garden where night flowers bloomed eternal. A small gathering, just Drake, Izira, Aldrich, Corvus, and a handful of trusted fortress staff who'd known Mary during her brief stay. Simple. Quiet. The way Mary would have wanted. Aldrich spoke first, his ancient voice gentle with respect. Mary was the kind of hero who never sought recognition. Who saved a life and then spent 23 years protecting that life without asking for anything in return except to see her niece safe and happy. She gave everything, her money, her time, her future, and finally her life itself, so that Izira and Aurora could exist. That is love in its purest form. That is sacrifice that changes the world. Izira tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat was too tight, her grief too overwhelming. Instead she pulled out her flute, the one Mary had given her years ago, and played. The melody was mourning made audible. Grief transformed into music. Love that had nowhere to go except out into the world through breath and sound, and desperate hope that somewhere, somehow Mary could hear it. Everyone wept. Even Aldrich, ancient beyond measure, had tears streaming down his face as Izira played her aunt into the next life. When the music finally faded, Izira knelt beside the grave where they'd buried Mary beneath the night flowers. You were my real mother, she whispered, her hand flat against the earth. Patricia gave birth to someone else's life in that house. But you chose me. You fought for me. You died for me. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that sacrifice. Aurora, as if sensing the importance of the moment, reached out one tiny hand toward the grave. And one of the night flowers bloomed brighter, its petals glowing with soft golden light. Dragon magic. Responding to Aurora's grief and love even though she was too young to understand what she'd lost. She would have loved watching you grow up, Izira told her daughter, lifting Aurora to hold her close. Teaching you to be brave. To be kind. To choose family based on love rather than blood. I promise you'll know her story. I promise you'll understand what she gave us. As the sun set and the night flowers bloomed in full glory, they stood together, Drake, Izira, Aldrich, and Aurora, and mourned the woman who'd made their family possible through love and sacrifice. 2 weeks passed before the council's judgment on Patricia was delivered. Exile. Complete and permanent. Stripped of pack membership, forbidden from entering any recognized territory, denied access to any resources or support from her former community. She would survive or die based on her own skills, with no one to help her, no one to protect her, no one to care if she lived or died. Mason and Brenna? Izira asked when Corvus delivered the news. Chose the pack over their mother, Corvus said quietly. Publicly denounced her actions. Said they wanted no association with what she'd done. They're not terrible people, Izira. They didn't know what Patricia was planning. And they're horrified by it. Izira nodded numbly. It didn't really matter. She had no desire to know her supposed siblings, no interest in building any connection to people who shared Patricia's blood. Let them have their lives. She had her own family now, the one she'd chosen or who'd chosen her. Life slowly, painfully returned to something resembling normal. Aurora thrived, growing strong and curious and fearless. Aldrich stayed, having no desire to leave his daughter and granddaughter after finally finding them. Drake was everywhere, protective and loving and patient as Izira worked through her grief. And every evening Izira visited Mary's grave, playing her flute while Aurora babbled and the night flowers bloomed in response to the music and love. I miss you, Izira would whisper to the earth that held Mary's body. Every day I miss you. But I'm trying. Trying to live the life you died to protect. Trying to be the person you always believed I could be. The night flowers never answered, but they bloomed brighter, and somehow that was enough. Epilogue. 1 year later. Aurora's first birthday arrived with golden autumn sunshine and a garden full of carefully chosen guests. No large celebration. Izira still couldn't quite trust crowds after everything that had happened. But Aldrich was there, and Corvus, and a few other fortress residents who'd become like family. Aurora had grown into a beautiful, fierce little girl with her mother's determination and her father's protective instincts. Her wings were stronger now, allowing her to flutter a few feet off the ground before tumbling back down with delighted shrieks. Her golden eyes took in everything with curiosity that spoke of intelligence beyond her months. And she'd recently started walking, toddling really with her wings spread for balance, looking like a tiny golden angel learning how to navigate the world. They gathered in the garden near Mary's grave where night flowers bloomed eternal even in daylight. A gift from Aldrich, who'd woven permanent magic into the earth so Mary would forever be surrounded by the beauty she'd loved. She's getting so big, Aldrich said, watching Aurora toddle between Drake and Izira, her laughter echoing through the garden. So strong. Like her mother, Drake said, his arm around Izira's waist, pulling her close. Stubborn and brave and absolutely unwilling to accept limits. Like her great-aunt, Izira corrected softly, her unseeing eyes turned toward Mary's grave. Mary taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up every time life knocks you down. Aurora chose that moment to toddle over to Mary's grave, her tiny hand reaching out to touch one of the glowing flowers. The bloom responded, brightening under her touch, and Aurora giggled with delight. May, she said clearly, the first real word she'd spoken besides Mama and Dada. May. Izira's tears fell freely as she knelt beside her daughter. Yes, baby. That's Mary. Your great-aunt who loved you so much she gave everything to keep you safe. Aurora touched another flower, her expression serious for a 1-year-old, as if she understood the importance of the moment. May, she repeated softly, then toddled back to her mother's arms. She'll grow up knowing her story, Drake said, kneeling beside them both. Knowing that she comes from a line of warriors who fought for her right to exist. That love, the kind Mary showed, is stronger than blood, stronger than law, stronger than anything. And she'll know, Izira added, holding Aurora close while her daughter's tiny wings wrapped around them both, that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who chooses to stand beside you when the world says you shouldn't exist. Who sacrifices for you. Who loves you not despite your differences but because of everything you are. They sat together in the garden, surrounded by impossible flowers, while Aurora babbled happily and played with the pendant Aldrich had given her, carved from dragon scale, etched with protective runes, a gift from a grandfather who'd searched for 23 years to find the family he'd lost. We won, Izira whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Drake or to Mary's grave or to the universe itself. It cost us everything, but we won. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure that sacrifice wasn't wasted. You already have, Drake said, pressing a kiss to her temple while Aurora dozed off in her mother's arms, exhausted from her birthday excitement. You changed the law. You proved hybrids can exist. You raised a daughter who will grow up knowing she's loved and wanted and powerful. That's not wasting Mary's sacrifice. That's honoring it. As the sun set and the night flowers bloomed in full glory, Aurora woke briefly, her golden eyes finding the grave one more time. May, she said drowsily, and one tiny hand waved as if saying goodbye. The flowers blazed brilliant gold for just a moment, so bright and beautiful that even Izira could sense the light through her enhanced gift. And in that moment she felt it. Not Mary's presence exactly, but something that might have been approval. Peace. Love transcending death and distance and the boundary between worlds. Thank you, Izira whispered to the grave, to the flowers, to the memory of the woman who'd saved her twice. For everything. For choosing me. For loving me when no one else would. For dying so my daughter could live. The flower's glow softened, gentle and warm, like a hand touching her face one last time. And then it faded, leaving only the eternal bloom of night flowers under stars, and a family gathered in love and grief and the bittersweet knowledge that some losses never truly heal. They just transform into something you learn to carry. Think. Izira went from disposable Omega to the woman who changed the world. From blind and broken to powerful beyond measure. From sold as property to choosing her own destiny, and paying the ultimate price to protect it. Mary's sacrifice. Rowan's death. Patricia's exile. And a baby who'll grow up knowing that love, real love, costs everything and is worth even more. If this story destroyed you emotionally, smash that like button and tell me in the comments. Did you cry when Mary died? Were you satisfied with Izira's vengeance on Rowan? And what did you think of Patricia's punishment? And here's my question for you. Should we tell Aurora's story when she grows up? See her navigate a world as the first legally recognized hybrid? Or should we explore what happened to Mason and Brenna, Patricia's children who chose the pack over their mother? Drop your vote in the comments. Don't forget, we upload new romantic fantasy stories every Wednesday and Saturday. Hit subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss an upload. There are so many more impossible love stories waiting to be told. Thank you for being here through Izira, Drake, Mary, and Aurora's journey. Thank you for crying with me. And thank you for believing that love, messy, sacrificial, chosen love, is always worth fighting for.